If you came here for a politically charged, highly partisan breakdown,
you came to the wrong channel.
But stick around, I think you'll like it. I'm shooting outside despite the fact that these cicadas are going a little crazy today because in Montreal we have like 2 months of summer and then 10 months of sadness, so I'm taking in all the sunlight I can get. So the National Legal and Policy Center have filed an FEC complaint against Ilhan Omar, Kate Wittenstein, Tim Minette, and E Street Group LLC, alleging various campaign finance violations. And as usual, reading the complaint, I had certain questions which I can only presume other people had, and therefore I looked into my own questions and figured I'd make a vlog breaking down answers to my questions so that hopefully other people can understand the situation as well.
Let's get into it.
The first question I had is, what exactly is the FEC? It is the Federal Elections Commission, and its purpose is to enforce, regulate campaigns finance laws. It is supposed to be an independent regulatory body. It was created in 1974, and its functions are described as follows: to disclose campaign finance information, to enforce the provisions of the law such as the limits and prohibitions on contributions, and to oversee the public funding of presidential elections. The commission is made up of 6 members who are appointed by the president and confirmed by the Senate. They have fixed terms. We don't need to get into that, but as one can imagine, when we have an even number of members on a panel, you know what, I think the cicadas are actually going to be a little too distracting. We're going to go finish this off inside. Be right back. Alright, so the commission is made up of 6 members, and whoever thought that was a good idea deserves a raise. Having an even number of members means that there could potentially be, a deadlock when it's 3 versus 3. And this is heightened by the fact that no more than 3 members of the commission can be from one political party. What's going to happen? There are going to be a lot of deadlocks. In fact, from 2008 to 2014, there was something like 200 deadlocked votes, which represented 14% of the decisions that the commission was called upon to adjudicate on. I guess the flip side argument is that if there is an odd number and one political party has more representation than the other, then all decisions are basically going to be along party lines in any event. So instead of having deadlocks along party lines, you're just going to have decisions along party lines, in which case the FEC is just going to become another politically charged, politically influenced body. Whatever, there's always problems to any system. My next question was, what is the burden of proof for complaints brought before the FEC? Is it beyond a reasonable doubt, or is it the standard civil preponderance of the evidence? And apparently it is the preponderance of the evidence, so it is 50% plus 1 civil burden of proof for complaints brought before the FEC. Alright, that is the technical side. Now let's get into the actual parties to the complaint and the complaint itself. The complainant, meaning the party or the entity that actually brought the complaint before the FEC, is the National Legal Policy Center. Did I get that right? From what I could tell, they don't actually describe themselves as being a right-leaning or conservative not-for-profit organization. And they actually have a pretty decent rating on Charity Navigator of 81, give or take, for transparency and accountability and financial. And that's a pretty decent rating as far as charities go, and if you want to check into any charity that you're looking into, Charity Navigator is a pretty decent tool, but it's not 100% immune from political influence, but whatever, that's not where we're going today. That being said, Wikipedia and other sources, take them for what they're worth, do describe the National Legal and Policy Center as being, quote, right-leaning. The respondents to the FEC complaint are Ilhan Omar, everybody already knows who she is, Kate Wittenstein, Treasurer for Ilhan for Congress, Tim Minette, and E Street Group LLC. We'll see this in the complaint, but E Street Group LLC, LLC meaning Limited Liability Corporation, was apparently a consulting firm working for Ilhan Omar. Tim Minette is a partner at E Street Group LLC, and according to his wife, also a partner of Ilhan Omar, and we'll get into that. Let's just go through what are called the facts and apparent violation of the complaint itself. I hear someone coming. The internet liked the rabbit ears the last time.
I'm gonna make breakfast. That might be a little loud.
In the complaint, the National Legal and Policy Center described themselves as follows. The primary purpose of the National Legal and Policy Center, a charitable and educational organization described in Section 501c3 of the Internal Revenue Code, is to foster and promote ethics in government and public life. Respondents include an individual candidate for federal office, a federal candidate campaign committee and its treasurer, a consultant, and a federal campaign committee, and his limited liability corporation. The complaint documents improper disclosures of campaign expenditures by the federal candidates committee and the personal use of campaign funds by the candidate. And bear in mind, I'll say it again as we get into this, these are just allegations, and as we're going to see from the allegations in the complaint, these are allegations that are based on allegations in a divorce proceeding, so they are allegations based on allegations, and obviously some documentary evidence, but they are allegations nonetheless, not facts, to be proven in the FEC Commission complaint according to the civil burden of proof of preponderance of the evidence. Let's read the allegations of the actual complaint now. The facts supporting this complaint are all taken from materials publicly available, including Federal Election Commission records. All material facts relied upon in this complaint are cited as to their source. The complaint cites Tim Minette's LinkedIn page, which identifies him as a partner of E Street Group LLC, and then cites substantial sums of money that have been paid to E Street Group LLC by Ilhan for Congress. So let's get into that, because that is the crux of the complaint. From August 9, 2018 to June 30, 2019, Ilhan for Congress reported disbursements totaling $222,838.38 to E Street Group LLC. Another $7,000 was reported as disbursements to Tim Minette on July 11, 2018. See Exhibits A and B. $222,000 US is like $1 billion Canadian. Among these disbursements, Ilhan for Congress reported 8 disbursements to E Street Group LLC totaling $21,546.94 for, quote, travel expenses. None of the 8 disbursements for, quote, travel expenses were itemized. See Exhibit C. And why is it important that these disbursements were not itemized? We just need to read the next paragraph. Federal Election Commission regulations require that campaigns that reimburse an individual for travel exceeding $500 must report the individual receiving the reimbursement as the payee and report the payments aggregating over $200 to any one vendor as memo entries on Schedule B. Each memo entry must include the name and address of the vendor, as well as the date, amount, and purpose of the payment. Ilhan for Congress did not report Tim Minette as the payee, but reported as the payee his consulting firm E Street Group LLC. Nor did Ilhan for Congress report the vendors who received payments aggregating over $200 for respondent Minette's travel on Schedule B. The bottom line overarching principle for all of this is basically an accounting principle. If you're going to claim something as an expense, you have to itemize what that expense was so that it can be determined as to whether or not it was a legitimate campaign expense at a later date under audit or upon further verification. One can't use campaign funds for personal purposes. That's the underlying principle of campaign finance laws. People donated that money for the purposes of the campaign and not so that the candidate can use those funds for any personal purposes. And when you just lump sum a bunch of payments without itemizing what those payments were for, it becomes impossible to determine whether or not those were legitimate campaign payments or used for personal purposes. And why did this all come to a head on or about August 20th? Well, something happened on August 19th. Tim Minette's wife filed divorce proceedings, which contained a number of allegations which brought into question the timing and legitimacy of certain payments made by Ilhan for Congress to Tim Minette and E Street Group LLC, and we'll get into it in the next paragraphs of this FEC complaint. Dr. Beth Jordan Minette, respondent Minette's wife, filed for separation and other relief in the District of Columbia's Superior Court on August 19, 2019, alleging that respondent Minette was having an extramarital affair with Rep. Ilhan Omar, see Exhibit D. Now, everyone has been flipping out about the fact that Ilhan Omar was alleged to be having an affair with another woman's husband, as though it's the first time that it's ever happened in politics and as though that is the actual issue here. I'll say here what I said in my comment on the Amazing Lucas's video. The extramarital affair is irrelevant politically speaking. It's a moral issue, it's a personal life issue, but it is not politically relevant to what's going on right now.
On that note, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.
She's good. She's good.
Bye!
See you soon. The affair is a moral issue and it is not a political or legal issue. Where it becomes a political or legal issue is whether or not payments that were made to E Street Group LLC and Tim Minette were in fact for legitimate campaign purposes or were favors among people who now are alleged to have been having something more than just a professional relationship. And again, it's critical to remind you that Exhibit D is the court filing for divorce and other relief filed by Dr. Beth Jordan Minette against her husband on the basis that he was having an affair. So you have to take those allegations for what they're worth, those allegations being one of an angry spouse seeking divorce from her spouse on the basis of an extramarital affair. It doesn't mean that they are true and it doesn't mean that they are false, but that is the context in which those allegations themselves are being made, and it is relevant to interpreting the probative value of those allegations. And the National Legal and Policy Center is drawing on those allegations in those proceedings to incorporate them into their allegations in their FEC complaint. And in fairness to the FEC complaint, they're not relying exclusively on the divorce proceedings filed by Tim Minette's spouse. They are relying on other documentary evidence as well, which is legitimate and raises certain legitimate questions, heightened by the timing of those payments as linked through the timeline described in the divorce proceedings by Tim Minette's wife against him. Okay. What are the payments? Although Minette's formal relationship with Rep. Omar's campaign began in July 2018 with the payment of $7,000 directly to Minette, the reimbursement for Minette's travel did not commence until April 2019, the same month that Dr. Minette alleges in her filing that her husband told her of the affair and made a, quote, shocking declaration of love, end quote, for Rep. Omar. It appears that respondent Minette's travel, as reported by Ilhan for Congress, may have been unrelated or only partially related to Omar's campaign, and here is the crux of the complaint. If Ilhan for Congress reimbursed Minette's LLC for travel so that Rep. Omar would have the benefit of Minette's romantic companionship. The expenditures must be considered personal in nature. Federal Election Commission regulations prohibit the use of campaign funds for personal expenses collateral to travel, either campaign or office holder, unless personal funds are used to reimburse the committee. Rep. Omar's filings do not reveal subsequent reimbursement for Minette's travel. And then we can jump to the conclusions to see what conclusions are being sought by this complaint. Complainant National Legal and Policy Center has found reason to believe respondents knowingly and willfully violated the Federal Election Campaign Act of 1971 as amended, which requires each treasurer of a political committee to file reports of receipts and disbursements in accordance with the provisions of the Act. Complainant National Legal and Policy Center is asking the Commission to conduct an investigation, including an audit of named respondent committee in accordance with the Federal Election Campaign Act of 1971 as amended. And there you have it. The FEC complaint is seeking an audit of the respondent committee, which is Ilhan for Congress, to determine whether or not these payments made to Tim Minette or his LLC were in fact legitimate campaign expenses or indirectly personal expenses because they coincidentally time with an alleged affair that is alleged in the wife's divorce proceedings. Whatever. The affair is absolutely irrelevant. It is just the catalyst to question the timing and legitimacy of these payments, which apparently had never occurred in the past, but only began occurring when the alleged affair began to occur. Incidentally, if you like this video and you like my content, be sure to like, share, subscribe, hit the notification bell, drop a comment in the comment section, share my video somewhere, everywhere, anywhere. It helps my channel grow. We did not actually look at the exhibits, which are very relevant, so let's do that right now. In Exhibit A, we see a list of the expenses paid to E Street Group LLC, and what is interesting is how the description of the payments changes over time. In 2018, all of the payments were described as fundraising consulting. The first time any of these expenses are described as travel expenses begins as of April 1st, 2019. April 2019 being the time that, according to Dr. Beth Jordan Minette's divorce proceedings, was the time that her husband Tim Minette told her that he was having an affair with Ilhan Omar. And you can see how the National Legal and Policy Center is sort of putting two and two together, that there was never any travel expenses paid to Tim Minette or E Street Group LLC until April 2019 when, according to the divorce proceedings, the affair started happening or culminated or whatever. Exhibit B is another 2018 expense which is described as fundraising and consulting and was paid to the recipient, Tim Minette. Why is this relevant? Go to Exhibit C. Exhibit C is a list of disbursements paid to E Street Group LLC, all beginning April 2019 and all described as travel expenses. And apparently there's some pictures of Ilhan Omar and Tim Minette coming out of restaurants and whatever. That may lend credibility to the fact that there was in fact this extramarital affair, but it doesn't change the question in law as to whether or not these expenses, even if paid in the context of an actual affair, were illegitimate expenses to begin with. It is still possible that notwithstanding any potential affair that Tim Minette might have been having with Ilhan Omar, that these expenses were nonetheless legitimate travel expenses. It's potentially possible that all of these payments were in fact legitimate travel expenses. In fact, the two of them could not have even been having an affair, and these travel expenses could still nonetheless be illegitimate campaign expenses. The affair is irrelevant except in the timing and the narrative that it tells of this story that National Legal and Policy Center is putting together and asking for a formal audit from the FEC. All right, there you have it. That is all. I tell you that it is a politically neutral analysis for anyone who is expecting a politically charged part of an interpretation. I hope you are gleefully disappointed. Incidentally, if anybody wants a Vlog Dog shirt and wants to support the channel, the link will be in the pinned comment below. And now you know your vlog. Peace out. Boom!